So again, welcome everybody. You know, I like to start with a little joke. So I'm going to tell one of my very favorite jokes, an oldie but a goodie, because it always makes me smile. So this is about a mother, and they've got an 11 o'clock service that she and her son are going to. So it's getting late, and she keeps calling her son. She said, "It's time to get up. We've got to go." Nothing. It's time to go. You've got to get dressed. Are you up? Nothing. So finally, it's getting so late, and she's so concerned. So she goes and she knocks on his door, and she said, "Son, are you up?" No answer. So she opens the door, and there's her son with the covers over his head, hiding. And she said, "You've got to get up." And he said, "I am not getting up." She said, "We're going to church." He said, "I am not going to church this morning." She said, "Why?" He said, "Because I'm not comfortable. I don't even think those people like me. I never give a good sermon." And she said, son, you have got to get up. You are the minister." That always makes me smile. I know it's an oldie, but it's a good one. So our topic this morning is free to be me. And that's what metaphysics is all about. It's about freedom. The dictionary says freedom is not being imprisoned. And it's also when we are free to be authentic. And again, I'm going to go back to the dictionary. The dictionary says being real, being genuine. So now I'm going to quote from those great philosophers, the Eagles, who said, "We live our lives in chains, and we never know we've had the key all along." Isn't that beautiful? You know, we come into metaphysics, many of us come out of traditional churches that said we are original sinners and we sin and we're going to hell and blah, blah, blah. We come weighted down. We're not free. We've got this whole story behind us telling us why we're not worthy, why we're sinners. You know what? There are no sins. There are mistakes. We are God's, not the original sinners. We are God's original blessings. And we stand in that awareness that we are God's original blessings. You know, unity in metaphysics is all about being free, free to be ourselves, free to be knowing that we are here. That song that Rachel played changed my life. When I walked into Agape International Center of Truth, it was Reverend Michael Beckwith 35 years ago, and they played Use Me. It truly changed my life. The fact that God could need me to shine its light, because I was always taught that we needed God, which we do, but that we were just dirt on the earth. God would have no use for sinners. God has every use for you and for me, because if we do not shine God's light, if we are not free and to be authentic, then God doesn't have the opportunity, or this universe, whatever Joe Dispenza calls God, the grand operational design, does not have an opportunity to shine its light through you and through me. God, it says God, this was a quote from one of the Fillmores, who are the founders of Unity. God does not need our performance. God needs our presence. Isn't that beautiful? We don't have to perform. We don't have to be who we are not. You know, Myrtle Fillmore, who was the co-founder of Unity, when they found metaphysics, because they were in traditional religion, and they found, you know, so often people think with metaphysics, oh, I've got to be perfect. Nothing's wrong. That is baloney. Because on the human realm, there's a lot of things that go wrong, aren't there? But on the spiritual realm, what we know here, we can take that upstairs and say, yes, this is going on in the world right now. This is going on with me. But there is a higher purpose and there is a higher power, that with that power, I can overcome anything. Even as I lay on my dying, I did a chaplaincy at UCLA and neurosurgery for several years, and people would, on their dying bed, but they would know, many of them, some of them didn't, and some of them died very unhappy, but most of them, that God was more, and that they were going to some place that was not hell, that they were holding the highlight, that there was a God that was so good and so gracious. So we get the opportunity as metaphysicians to know that God needs us to light its light. Now I'll go back to Myrtle Fillmore. After she got into metaphysics, she could have said, all is well, I'm good. She was dying. She was dying of tuberculosis because that's what happened to people in those days. She didn't say everything's good. She said, I am a very sick woman, and by the grace of God and by my prayer work over the next 2 years, I know I'm going to be healed. She stood in a higher truth, but she told her truth. Charles was lame because of a hip injury when he was a child. They didn't say, oh, he's just walking perfectly. And, of course, for where he was at the time, yes. But they didn't say, oh, it's all good. She said, I am going to pray. And she said, I am going to know that there is a power and presence for good, and Charles can heal. And he did. And by her prayers, he really stepped out and became she was the healer, the spiritual anchor, the prayer anchor for unity. And he was the intellect that did all of the writing. But it was because of their honesty, their authenticity, and to be free and to be opened. You know, authenticity, they say, starts in the secret place of the Most High. It never starts in the spotlight. You know, if we're concerned about the world, it's okay to say, I'm really upset, I'm frightened, what's going on, whatever you want to say. It's not denying the fact. It's being authentic and real. Yes, this is happening, and I've got a God that is bigger. And I know that I am here to be the presence of God on earth right now, to shine my light, to know that indeed there is peace on earth, and it starts with me. You know, years ago, and Dr. Roger Teal wrote about it in his book, so I'm not telling anything out of turn. When he and his wife, Erica, got married, their marriage wasn't, Erica had been married before her husband died, left her with a 2- and 3-year-old. She met Dr. Roger, who was the head of Mile High in Colorado. And they got married, and the marriage wasn't going well. And here were these really 2 good people, and they sought some counseling. And the counselor said to them, you're going to nice each other right out of this relationship. She said, you're not being authentic. They said, well, you know, we don't know her. She said, no, you have the freedom to be authentic. That doesn't mean that you accuse the other person of anything. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the freedom to say, this is how I feel. This is what's going on with me. And you know, that's why spiritual community is so important, because we get to be with people who are on the same level that we are. We can be honest. We meet in that community room, and we don't have to say, oh, everything's wonderful, as we're just about falling on the floor. You know, we get to be authentic and free. That's not to say we complain, but we get to be real and true. Can we be real and true and authentic with everybody? No, because we meet people where they are, but we hold our truth. If someone says, oh, you know, my toe is hurting and my leg and this and that, we don't have to agree with them. We can be authentic and say, I will hold you in prayer. That's authentic. You know, I've got my older son who is wonderful. He's successful. He's just a dear human being. But I only go so far with authenticity with him, because he's not on that level. So I meet him where he is. And for a long time, I couldn't be authentic. I didn't know how. I was so afraid I was going to hurt his feelings. I didn't know how to respond. And now I do the best I can with him. But I try to meet him where he is, but I don't compromise myself. Does that make sense to anybody? So we want to be authentic. Practicing the presence of God is a huge, huge opportunity for each one of us, because it's always knowing, yes, this is taking place in the human realm, but I know something more. I have a God that is the divine physician. I have a God that is not the doctors can diagnose all they want. Only God, the grand operational design, this magnificent universe is always the final prognosis. So we come into this faith, both, I think we've got two newcomers here. I think you're a newcomer, and I know Alan is. So I'm so grateful for that. Sometimes we come into metaphysics with all of this guilt and shame. Let it go. You have been called to be here. This is a calling to be here, to be a light, because if we are dim and if we are being this performer, and I lived in California for 30 years, I know what performers are. Kiss, 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 all is well. Well, that's cocktail chatter. That's boring to me. Isn't it? I'd much rather say, I haven't had a really great day today. And then I can say to you, I'm so sorry about that. Let me hold you in prayer. Would you like to talk about it more? But not all of the stories that we get into. And, we get to be a place, a light. Ye are the light of the world, is what Jesus said. We have been called to be here, to be the light of the world. So we can lay down our script. We don't have to have a script. We can be authentic. For so long in my life, when I first married, I was married when I was very young. I'd modeled most of my life, blah, blah, blah. I had no idea how to be authentic. So I married a very strong person, a good man, strong personality. So I just was a little doll in his cabinet. And he brought me out when it was time to meet and greet people. Didn't have an authentic bone in my body because I didn't know how. I didn't know how to be real with you. I was full of shame and doubt. I'd come in as a sinner. I didn't know how, so I just smiled, And when we were divorcing 20 years later, he said, I just wish you could have been real with me. And all I could say was, I didn't know how. But we are here to learn how, to know of our value and our importance. A friend of mine, one of my practitioners it's funny how things happen. Last night, she sent me a card from Jackie Lawson, I think. Well, I opened it up, and here was this kaleidoscope. And all these colors again and again. There was no writing, just the kaleidoscope. And we talk about that here, that each one of us are part of the kaleidoscope of life. And if we are false and phony and have this persona following a script, we're dense. And that light can't come through. And our part of the kaleidoscope never lights up. Because we are a part and parcel of this universe. If we don't shine our light, that light doesn't get shown, period, paragraph. And we are an integral part of God's plan, or we wouldn't be here. I truly believe, and my belief, but the Fillmores believed, Holmes believed, all of the great metaphysicians, that we have come into this lifetime with a purpose. We say, I was an accident. There are no accidents in God's perfect universe, are there? We have come in here at this time and this place, which isn't it's a harder time, isn't it? It's not the best, but we have agreed to be here. And in that agreement, we have agreed to be you and to be me and to be that place for God to use. God needs us to light its light as you and as me, and we can only do that when we're authentic. So let's go on to the next story, the next point, which is truth. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Telling the truth, we are authentic where we hurt, authentic where we struggle. Do we have to go into the whole story of, and this happened and that happened, and 30 minutes later we're still going on about this story? But we can be honest and say, I'm struggling right now. Would you pray for me? Where we are spiritually. I was at a class yesterday. It was very interesting. And she said on a 1 to 10, there was a whole group of people. She said, where are you spiritually? And I thought, I wonder how many people are going to say a 10. And that wasn't the truth. Some said I'm a 2. Some said I'm a 5. A couple said I'm a 10. But they were honest and truthful. We don't always have to, I'm a 10. No, not always. Trust me. I've shared in this, and I just was sharing with Sandra, and I'm going to pull a complete blank. My beautiful friend back there, Lisa. And I thought I had shared it with you. But years ago, 7.5 years ago, when my son had decided, my younger son, who is a precious man, decided that he was not going to speak to his sister and I, nor could we see his 3 children ever again. I shared about that. But I was very hesitant to share about it because I thought, as a minister, you shouldn't have children that aren't speaking to you. That just isn't. I did. I thought, here I am, a minister standing up here, and I've got a son who doesn't speak to me, can't see my grandchildren. And it was heartbreaking. But after about a year or 2, I started talking about it. And in my honesty and in my transparency, it gave you or whomever permission to also say, I'm so glad you said that because I've had a child that has done this, or I've had a niece or a nephew that has done this. By me being honest and authentic and saying, you know what, I may be up here, but boy, I've got something heartbreaking. It gave you permission. And when we come in as authentic human beings, we give others the permission to be authentic. They may choose not to take it, but we have been authentic. That is our truth. So this went on for 7.5 years. And finally, I really had, about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, I had turned it over completely. And Marianne Williamson says something. She said, a reason, a season, or a lifetime, right? So I thought to myself, well, I've had this beloved child, my youngest child, for 47 years. And maybe our agreement was only for 47 years. And I won't see him again in this lifetime, which was very sad, But I had come to that agreement, and I had to be grateful for the years that I had him, right? But I never lost the vision that someday I would open the door. There'd be a knock on my door, and David, my son, would be standing there. Never lost it. I also was very resigned in gratitude to the fact that I've known him because he was always a real joy. And on June 3rd, first of all, the spiritual care team had given me this beautiful bouquet, big sunflower in it, which was so bright and shiny. So on June 3rd, I had taught a class. I came home and I was reading, and there was a knock on the door. And as always, a knock on the door. I think maybe it's David. And I opened the door, and it was David. So at first I said, I think I'm dreaming. And he said, Mom, you're not dreaming. It's me. So as he sat down across from me, there was this big sunflower. And I said, look at the sunflower, David. You have brought sunshine back into my life. So again, I had to release it. He never said he'd come back. And I said when he left, I said, oh, I hope you'll come back. I've missed you so. He never said he would come back, but I had to live in the gratitude that I can let him go, and gratitude that I finally opened that door and my son was there. So we can release, but we never have to stop holding a vision for something higher to happen, right? So I was so grateful. I wrote, freedom isn't our image, but our honesty. I could have gone all of these years and never said a word, but then nobody else had freedom to say, I've had that in my family too. And maybe if there's anybody in here today that also has had this kind of issue with a child, by me sharing this, that anchors your hope too. Does that make any sense? Being authentic, and we don't have to share our truth with everybody. Some people aren't safe, but for those that are safe, we really can be honest, because if I am free to be honest with you, you are free to be honest with me. And so we've got the truth, which will set us free, and it did in my case, in many ways, because it also let me know that I wasn't alone. And the third thing is a call to authenticity. And as so often happens when I'm giving a talk, something immediately shows up. First of all, the kaleidoscope. And then I've got 4 grandsons, and one of them, his best friend, is just finished the MCATs and passed them to get into medical school, but he's on a very tight budget, blah, blah, blah. So there was a short article about some scholarships, full scholarships available. And I never send articles, but I sent this article to this grandson, and he wrote back and he said, if you think I mean, this was just the tone of the text. If you think I have time to read articles, he said, you're dreaming. I have so much on my mind, so much going on. He said, don't send any more articles. So I thought, I've never sent an article before. I don't know what he's talking about. However, that could have really set me, because I let it go. And you know what? This morning, well, I didn't read it till this morning. He sent it at 11:30 last night. He said, Nana, I'm so sorry. I had an accident with my car. And he said, the minute you said that, he said, he said, thank you for the article, and I'm really sorry. So again, his authenticity, he didn't have to write me, but he came at that angry place and then came as the authentic self, So I'm sorry, this is what's going on with me. And again, to show up as God intended us to be, not the biting, but the truth behind. Have we ever done that? We've bit at somebody. It had nothing to do with them. But if we come from that authentic place and say, I'm really sorry that this or that, this was what was going on with me. It makes such a difference. Honesty. We have Jesus, the way shower. Was he honest? Of course he was. Was he authentic? Of course he was. He cried. He laughed, because we see the laughing Jesus with his children. He ate with his disciples. He drank wine. I'm not. This isn't a plug for the liquor store. He wept. He was angry at times. He was an authentic human being. And he said to you and to me, these things and greater shall you do. Follow me. He didn't say worship me. He said follow me. Be authentic. Be who you were meant to be. Because when he was real, he was free. When we are real, we are free. Alex, I shouldn't have said his name. Maybe I did already. Oh God, if he listens to this, he'll kill me. But in his authenticity back, that I was in an accident, he was free. It wasn't a pretense anymore. The Velveteen Rabbit, has anybody ever read that? And it says to be real. He said, in order to be real, he said, all of your fur is scratched off and your ears are thing and your eyes are droopy. He said, but it's worth every bit of it to be real, to be free, to absolutely know that you and I are a living blessing, that you and I have a meaning and a purpose in this lifetime. We are a place for God to use me, so that I can be your light, so that I can be an authentic human being, to say who I am, what I'm here for, why I'm here for, to tell the truth, to be authentic, because in the truth we will be free. We watch Gandhi, this little man walking around, absolutely standing in his truth, saying that, I am here on a mission. I am here for God. I am here for freedom. Martin Luther King saying, I have a dream. I have a dream. And just real quickly, since we're talking about Juneteenth, do you know the story about that? Mahalia Jackson was one of the great probably the greatest gospel singer of all time, was very close to Dr. King. She loved him, she followed him, and Mahalia Jackson was offered a fortune to sing in Las Vegas because she was the gospel voice. At that time, it still is, and she wouldn't do it. She said, I only sing for God. Authentic, I only sing for God. She was with Martin Luther King in the front seat, in the front row when he gave his I Have a Dream speech. But as he started that speech, if you read the whole speech, he was kind of going blah, blah, blah. I mean, he never, but it was just, it was more rote. And she stopped, she put her hand up, and she said, Martin, tell them the truth. Tell them about your dream. And at that point, he said, I have a dream. He was authentic. He came from that place. He had a dream. He was sharing his truth, his life with us. So today as we go forth, remember that God doesn't need our performance. God needs our presence, our life, our truth. You know, the truth of who we are, that I am a representation of God on earth. The second thing is tell the truth. The truth shall set us free every single time. I'm so glad that you were so kind when I told my truth. You know, it made such a difference in my life and in some other people's lives too. And then a call to authenticity. What happened with my grandson was so profound. He came forth with this blah, 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 but then he came forth and said, Nana, this is what happened to me. This is the truth. This is who I am. So as Mahalia Jackson said to Dr. King, she said, Martin, tell them about your dream. She was saying, be authentic. So you and I, we go forth now as we're approaching the 4th of July. We are free to be me. We are free to be authentic. And our freedom comes not in our humanity, but in our divinity of knowing who we are and what we are here for. And what we are here for is we are here for the light of God to shine through us, to elevate us, to lift us, and to stay in that high place that I truly am here for God, for life, and for truth. And nothing shall absolutely take me anyplace else. I am here for peace. When I see there is not peace, I stand for peace, and that is my authentic truth. So God bless you all. Thank you for being here, and so it is. Amen.